We are live. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I'm one of your co-hosts, Blake Ruffino. Alongside me is my counterpart and co-host, Joe DeLeone. Good evening, good sir. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing especially great because spring practices are starting to kick up. We've got a couple big programs that have been rolling out, Blake. So it is a great week because there is football starting to happen.
Yeah, the NFL certainly took way today with all the free agent moves. It has not stopped as of yet. But spring football, we got kids going out there in pads and making stuff happen. We will talk about some things. Austin Mack versus Keelan Russell. Something, if you're not paying attention to one of the bigger teams in the ACC, and I say bigger teams because they damn near just almost won the conference, Bo Prabula versus Eli Holstein. Some other things that we will talk about going into the spring football window that you and I will discuss. But I am glad that spring football is here and that some actually take it a little bit more serious than others.
Yeah, just overall, I'm really curious to kind of see some of these new faces with some of these new teams, and I'll bring that up later when we get to the segment. It's always intriguing whenever spring happens because you do have to do a little bit of digging to find out who's making buzz. It's not like with OTAs and training camp in the NFL where there is wall-to-wall coverage that's happening on ESPN and on NFL Network that's breaking down like this is every little thing that's going on. This is who's winning the quarterback battle, whatever it might be. There are a lot of bits of information that are behind paywalls on various websites that you kind of have to go and sift through.
Yeah, don't say. Who would have ever thought that would be behind paywalls? But it is. We will continue to monitor these situations as spring goes on. You start getting some identifiers. You know, the team that we talk about today we had a discussion about Kenny Minchie versus C.J. Carr. If you remember a lot last spring, and it was C.J. Carr that wound up winning the battle. So we'll talk about Notre Dame. I don't think C.J. Carr is in a battle again this year. At least it wouldn't seem. But we will talk about Notre Dame. We'll do a deep dive. We'll continue on our path of breaking these teams down. We'll continue on our path of talking about teams. And, Joe, I'm just going to go ahead and say playoffs are complete bust. Fireable offenses to some of these assistant coaches if you do not get to a playoff with this Notre Dame schedule and this Notre Dame team that you have lined up for you here. So we'll break down Notre Dame as well. Hot seat tracker, we continue on that. Lincoln Riley is up, and I got to tell you, man, I just don't see it. But we'll definitely continue on our hot seat tracker as well. But I want to start off by asking you, did you see Greg Sankey's comments on Feinbaum today?
I did, and to a degree, I don't know if I know that he's trying to imply that he doesn't think that separation is good, but I'm not really buying it. I feel like his one general statement was easily misconstrued on a separate issue of not the conference separation, of saying that he agreed with the president that he wants a lot of things to kind of go back to the way they were. I thought that was a bit misconstrued because it was more of the sentiment of he wants to be able to focus on the football and not the semantics of all the off the field stuff. So,
well, he's talking about the portal. He's talking about ability. Yeah. He's talking about, because I mean, how many phone calls does he receive about this isn't fair, that's not fair, this isn't fair, that's not fair? And I'm sure he's tired of taking those phone calls. And so, you know, he even said that if we got to go to an all SEC schedule, we will. Joe, I'm telling you, you know, we're talking about Notre Dame today. If these conferences do that, what does Notre Dame do?
I know that you keep bringing this up. Notre Dame would still be able to negotiate a scheduling agreement with somebody.
If
like a loose affiliation with a conference.
If Greg Sankey, if what he said today, well, then they'd be joining a conference, essentially.
Well, they would just do what they're doing at the ACC, where they would maintain their own home broadcasting deal. It would make the most sense for them to do it the Big Ten, because the Big Ten, one of their broadcasting partners, NBC. So if they maintain the NBC relationship and they kept the money from that and then had a scheduling affiliation, it is still a win-win for that to happen.
If I'm the Notre Dame, I'm going in the ACC.
You know, the ACC
Exactly.
Why would you want to be a part of the lesser
Because
competitive?
I don't have to worry about the money. I would get their playoff money if I make it. And 2, I don't have to go through a tougher schedule. I swear to God, I do it. You're already doing it in other sports. It makes the most sense. I get paid more than anybody because I have my own TV deal. I'm already aligned in the conference in other sports to pretty much every degree. And I get a easier schedule. Are you kidding me?
Okay, they obviously already have the scheduling agreement, so it's kind of a moot point. But I would think the whole matter of the reality that you're pitching here, that you're discussing, is if all these conferences ended up separating themselves and only playing conference schedules, and they didn't play non-conference schedules.
That's exactly
but Notre Dame I would ultimately believe would want to play not a tougher schedule, but would want to be able to build a better slate of games for themselves to play. Because if they can't have control of being able to play these non-conference, these non-ACC teams like they currently do, they would then be handed a pretty shitty schedule.
Well, nobody
would.
Again, if what Greg Sankey says in conferences is stay inside their conference, then any of these preseason games don't happen in other conferences. Essentially. Which would be a bummer. A complete bummer. I don't want to see that happen, but God, I just hope they figure this out. It'd be god awful if they don't. But nevertheless, everyone do us a favor by hitting the like and share. Share to all those groups if you're on Facebook and to all those social media pages. You're watching us, listening to us on YouTube. Like, subscribe, notification bell wherever you listen to podcast. Rate, review, and subscribe. Every Ruffino and Joe show is brought to you by our good friends over at FanDuel. Download the FD Sportsbook app today. Use your mobile device when doing so. For any thoughts, questions, concerns, go to FanDuel.com/RG for more details. Joe and I always tell you, we ask you to set your preferences there, set a number that you do not want to supersede in placing those bets with our partners and friends over at FanDuel. FanDuel is the number one spot to place all your bets, parlays, future bets, and or if you want to bet on USA taking on Mexico tonight as Paul Skeens takes the mound at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time, you can do that. USA all the way. I keep hearing that this is Mexico's best team, but have you ever seen Paul Skeens? That's what I'm going to keep saying. So hopefully I did throw a little money down today on USA beating Mexico, but that's neither here nor there. But I did it with our good friends over at FanDuel. Again, download the FD Sportsbook app today and do us a favor and hit that subscribe button if you are on YouTube. All right, Joe. We continue on our path here doing deep dives of teams as we're kind of coming into spring, fall not too far away. Tonight we go up to South Bend, Indiana. As we go to South Bend, Indiana, we break down the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, a team that just missed the playoffs a season ago after coming off of a national title contending run. When you go look at the Notre Dame Fighting Irish in the year of 2026 of our Lord, how do you see this team going into the season?
Blake, this 2026 Notre Dame team is the accumulation of the success that they had back in 2024. What I mean by this is that in 2024, it was an aberration. It was unexpected for Notre Dame to have made it as far as they did because they had so many youngsters, so many freshmen, inexperienced guys that were playing at a really high level. The hype for Notre Dame in 2026 is built off of the fact that you've got a number of key juniors that are some of the best players at their positions in the country. They're not just bringing back key contributors. They're bringing back experience. They're bringing back high-level play, key draft prospects for the upcoming draft. There is a lot of talent on the table, Blake, for Notre Dame to accomplish their goal of getting to a national championship. There's a reason why they're one of the highest odds right now to win a national championship or at least reach a national championship on FanDuel. We can sit here and talk about the schedule, and we're going to dig into that a little bit later. It is obviously extremely favorable for them to get to the college football playoff. It would be insane if they did not. It is not the same challenge as it was last year. It all comes down to how do they perform when they're on a difficult field and having to face teams in the college football playoff. Like the one main thing, aside from all the talent that's returning, though, their success is contingent on the emergence, the growth of somebody in their wide receiver room, whether that's Mylan Graham or Quincy Porter, who they brought in from Ohio State, whether that is Jordan Faison taking another step and becoming a key piece, Jaden Greathouse coming back from the injury, taking a step forward and looking like the version of himself that we saw in the 2024 CFP run that they had. Like, there is such a visible path here. And as we could break down this team further, it comes down to the success that they have at receiver for me.
So I think you bring up an interesting point on how you ended here. So let's get to it. I don't think, Joe, on any team, unless you are an elite level team, like a Notre Dame can be, but even then, that you are able to instantly replace a guy like Jeremiah Love. That is very difficult to replace. However, I look at Notre Dame for the first time in a couple of years and ask myself the question that I think Mike Denbrock's been building to since his return back to Notre Dame. Faison, Greathouse, Porter, Graham. You tag that along with C.J. Carr going into technically his sophomore year, but really his junior year. Mm-hmm. Are you able to take a step like, and I use this example, where what Denbrock has done with second-year quarterbacks under his tutelage. Now, you look at some of the guys that he had, whether it be Riley Leonard. Well, he didn't have 2 years with Mike.
No, in 1 year. And he still had a good year out of it. He still got a pretty good year out of Riley Leonard.
Good year out of him. You almost won a national title. You got there. Mm-hmm. What happens when you look at quarterbacks in year 2 under Mike Denbrock? Ritter, Daniels. The massive leaps that both of them took have been monumental. Now, I am not stating that he is going to be the sole reason, like Ritter, where you kind of leads him to a playoff. I don't think that he will be – he can't run like Jaden Daniels, so that's a different beast, right? But Jaden's step was how much better he threw the football under Mike in year 2. I think that where you're losing the outright dude at running back in Jeremiah Love, you add Graham, you add Porter to tag along with Faison and Greathouse, who can be one of the better wide receiver units in the country. You're going to be mad at this, but I don't think that, and this isn't really a hot take or a mean take, I don't think when people look at wide receiver rooms that people ever point at Notre Dame as being in that list. They think of big-time offensive lines. They think of a dominant running game. And under Marcus Freeman, they think of really good secondaries and really stout defense. There are so many things on this team that you can look at and that you can talk about in reference to whether it be replacing Jeremiah Love or replacing things, critical needs on your defense, whatever it may be. I really think that this unit, that this team, their core of what I'm going to be looking at for them is the wide receiver core and the quarterback going into year 2. I think that I expect this passing game to be a little bit more downfield and a little bit better than what we saw from them a season ago. You certainly have the talent to do it. So when I look at Notre Dame going into the season, it's not the old school Notre Dame that I think about, even though, Joe, between you and I, we both think that they might have the best offensive line in the country coming into all of this. So now you add a really good offensive line if they can stay healthy, an extremely talented wide receiver room with a quarterback going into year 2 as a starter. And you're losing Jeremiah Love, but there's parts of me that think that you might even be better. That you offensively may even be better. And that is not a shot by any stretch of the imagination of Jeremiah Love, because that's not what I'm trying to do. Now, can Williams and others take a hold of that run game, which will also be a critical part of what you want to ultimately do? But offensively, Joe, this starts and ends with me with how does year 2 as a starter for C.J. Carr look like? And can some of these extremely talented wide receivers take the steps that they're going to need to because they have all the talent to be able to do it?
Right. There's a lot of knowns with this team, with the fact that like we know that Leonard Moore is the best corner in the country. Christian Gray is going to be able to bump inside into the slot, which is great. And DJ McKinney is a really underrated addition. We know that their pass rush is talented, and it just got deeper with the addition of Keon Keeley. But Bryce Young and Boubacar Traore were really productive at generating pressures last year. Their linebacker unit's fast and athletic with Kingston Viliamo Asa and Drake Bowen. Their safety room is also incredibly deep, and they just added Joey O'Brien, who's a tall, long 5-star safety who maybe he contributes and gets into the mix.
Hold on.
Yeah.
I think I missed on him because when I was looking at him today, I was like, holy shit. I don't know if this dude doesn't play like now. So I'm sorry.
I don't know. It might be a little too deep for him to get on the field.
I don't know. This is a freak.
Well, he's going to be a good football player regardless, which is why it was such a big pickup. And then you mentioned the offensive line. The offensive line is deep as well because they've recruited so well. And I think that even if there are injury issues, they can probably get by if needed.
Maybe more on the left side of the offensive line. You still got some inexperience along the right side of your offensive line, but dude, they got so much depth there too.
Right. The run game, you bring up a good point. I think it's the right point, is that you're never going to be able to just straight up 1-for-1 replace somebody as talented as Jeremiah Love, who's being considered for a top 5 pick in the upcoming draft. Instead, you're going to have to find ways to work around it, which is being more impactful through the air. And I also do think, for those who remember before they moved to primarily a 2-back rotation and they were rotating Anais Williams into games, he was a really good receiving back, and he was just a really good running back overall. I think that there is a chance with him coming back to step up and being a 1,000-yard rusher, knowing the offensive line that he has ahead of him.
To your point on being receiving back, again, I tag Jaden on this. I mean, the Bama games, the situations that LSU overcame. Joe, I think there's a lot to be said about Mike going into a year 2 with a quarterback and how they utilize him.
Right. The whole system feels like it is set up to be just like, and I'm not saying that CJ Carr wins the Heisman. I'm just like so emphatically, but it's very similar offensively to what Jaden Daniels had in that historic year that he had. Again, I'm not saying that CJ Carr comes out and stumps what Jaden Daniels did. They're very different players, but It's to your point of not only did Jaden Daniels play really well, but it also helped that he had a perfect system around him that Denbrock needed in order to like really facilitate Jaden's growth and his performance. So you've got to go to a line. It all comes down to the receivers. That is where everything is going to be. And to some degree, I think that we saw a lot of really good stuff from CJ Carr, more than some of these other quarterbacks that we've talked about coming into their second year as a starter. It feels like we had inconsistent play from a lot of these dudes. Like Julian Sayin had some rough patches. Arch Manning obviously had a rough start. Dante Moore had rough patches. I feel like CJ Carr had been the most steady. He wasn't perfect. He had a lot of headaches and mistakes in tough spots, but I felt like CJ Carr was one of the more steady first-year starters from last season, which is why I don't think a lot of Notre Dame fans look at CJ Carr and think, man, he needs to do a lot of these things better and take a giant leap and be more consistent in order for us to hit our potential. But he does need to go from being young and promising to actually dominant and becoming that projection of being one of the best quarterbacks in the country. There's a lot that probably goes into that, and it is kind of contingent on the receivers.
Needs to be better on deciding what he wants to do in these RPO situations. I don't think that is a
no. I mean, some of the bad pick that he threw against Miami was
right.
RPO.
Well, not even then. You know, there were some games down the stretch that I thought he needed to get better in. I think he will. I mean, this kid was a redshirted freshman a year ago as a starter. So does he take that next step? Again, the running game, I think, can be very much beneficial for them because it always is going to be. But is that run game going to step up? Again, you're replacing arguably the best back in the draft. I don't even know why I said arguably. The best running back in the draft. And that's not easily replaceable, but you have the key pieces on the outside to do a lot of damage. Now, Joe, defensively for me, when I look at them, Let me just read off these names. Chance Young, Keeley, Gray, Christian Gray, Traore, Idon Schuler, Leonard Moore, DJ McKinney. I'm just going to tell you right now, with the schedule that you have and the list of those names of players that I just listed off, if you're not a top 10 defense, hang it up. Because
it's an indictment on Chris Ash if you're not a top 10 defense.
Indictment. You got – I'm not even going to throw Keeley in there. At being conservative, I think that you have 3 to 4 guys that are top 64 picks in next year's draft. And I think that is conservative, right?
Yeah.
I'm being very conservative. You better be dominant. Now, I wonder, Joe, the 2 games we saw him lose, I don't think the interior defensive line played to their standard. Does that get better? But you have more of a runway this year to be able to do that and figure those things out. This defense, especially in their secondary, Joe, you have the talent to be one of the best. This linebacking core, you have a lot. And listen, I purposely left the Louisiana guy out of it because I didn't want to be a homer. But regardless of that, defensively, you should be one of the top 10 best units in the country. And I think that is what makes Notre Dame that much dangerous. Listen, here's the truth, Joe, whether we want to admit this or not. From a national perspective, we look at Notre Dame, or people around the nation who aren't Notre Dame fans look at Notre Dame and say they can get there, but they can't ever win it. Or they have a lot of talent, but they can't ever overcome. This is the most talent defensively, collectively, that they've had in some time, maybe other than 2 years ago. And then they got hurt there too. This is a plethora, great vocabulary word that my mother taught me when I was in the 4th grade. This is so much talent. And then your talent below that, I mean, Keon Keeley might not start, Joe. He might not.
No, he's not going to. And that the whole point of him coming in is to be a rotational guy. And they've always been a team under Freeman.
That is your rotational piece.
Right.
So again, Joe, if this defense is not a top 10 defense after game 12, somebody needs to have a finger pointed at them.
Well, the obvious person to point out again is Ash. I think one of the most underrated things too that they did is their interior defensive tackle room was not underwhelming, but it wasn't like super dominant as Notre Dame has had in the past. DeLeone Gray that they brought in from Oregon, gigantic kid, huge kid. I think he was 340. They haven't had a body like that can start in the interior in some time. Last year they had a bunch of undersized dudes, which made it really tough. And Francis Brew is the one player that a lot of people keep talking about as a high potential player. I think that the defensive tackle additions out of anything is where Notre Dame has the most potential to have a greater impact that drives their success. Here is the one thing. So maybe I'm going to come off as self-deprecating by saying this, being a Notre Dame fan. I feel like if Notre Dame has issues with their defense, we won't find out until the college football playoff. This could be a circumstance where
I disagree. I think defensively there's a game that you'll figure it out, and then offensively you'll figure it out against Miami.
Like, okay, understandably, if you have a bad defense against Miami, that is going to cost you. But if Notre Dame gave up theoretically 28, actually that's the low now. If they gave up 30 points to Miami in the middle of the season after they put together a bunch of really good defensive performances leading up to that, if they gave up 30 points to Miami, I wouldn't come out of it thinking that Notre Dame's defense is screwed up. I would just think, oh, this was a really good game against a really good offense. I'm pointing this out to say that if their defense really costs them, I feel like it's not going to happen until the end of the season because the most challenging offense that they will see is that Miami team. And Miami is also replacing quite a bit. So it's not really a premier offense that is going to completely ultimately like expose any problems that they have. We believe that Miami's offense is going to be really good this upcoming year, but they could be going through their own growing pains with replacing offensive linemen, as we've discussed in previous episodes. But and this kind of goes into what we're talking about here with the schedule, what they're expected to see this upcoming season. It doesn't provide us with very many litmus tests of how good they actually are. That's what I'm trying to get at here. You end up facing off with Miami. You get to go to BYU and you face SMU. It is a constant recurring comment that is made by everybody that criticizes Notre Dame is that they're playing a soft-ass schedule. If they go 11-1 with the schedule, they go to the playoff. But I'm pointing out that the downside to having a favorable schedule to get you in, it makes it harder for you to have enough tests to understand what you need to
I agree.
Focus on improving, just like what Ohio State did this past year that we talked about ad nauseum.
You got to face adversity.
Yeah.
If you don't face adversity throughout the season, you don't know how to react to it. And by the time that you get into December and the first time that you got to react, your argument about the Ohio State thing is very accurate. When you're not facing adversity and then you face adversity and finally get popped in the mouth in December, it will be too late. Their schedule is very soft. And I know that we're going to get to it in just a moment. But, Joe, they will get tested in some areas. But the problem is Joe, I got to be real with you. If they don't show high levels of dominance, and I mean high levels of dominance, like severe levels of dominance in some of these games, I will be worried. And people will be like, and remember I say this now, okay? I'm not saying you got to blow teams out by 42. But what I am saying is that some of these teams don't remotely have the remote talent that you have. It's going to show from a Notre Dame perspective, mentally, how locked in are you throughout the season? Because you can't have ups and downs against shitty ass schedules. I thought that was one of their problems a season ago, to be honest with you. You can blow out and score 70 against Arkansas, and then 2 weeks later, you're in a dogfight against Boston College. Where's your focus? And I say that, but that is not just a Notre Dame problem. We've seen
it happens to every team. It happens to every team where they shit.
It happens to every team.
Yeah.
I mean, to some extent, it happened to the national champion.
Well, yeah, I mean, Penn State and Iowa.
So, I mean, you go through it. So they're not the only team that's got to go through that. Now, I know that we're going to go through their schedule, but Joe, there are some games in here that not that I even remotely think that they're going to lose, but I think like Bobby Petrino's a really good play caller. He's a really good play caller.
But like UNC.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say UNC ends up being, I think, a plucky ACC team that goes 8-4. I don't think that they have the bodies to challenge.
Oh no, they don't. But here's the
like
thing:
Notre Dame.
let me rephrase on what I'm saying. If you have a weakness, Bobby Petrino will find it and expose it because he will.
That's a fair way to put it.
He will. And then, really, your only test, your true, real test, comes later in the year when it's against Miami at home. I mean, let's just be blunt. Yeah. That's your real litmus test.
To pull up their schedule, by the way, to read it off. Again, the three buckets that I always do should be wins, tough matchups, and then toss-up game on it can go either way. Should be wins, Wisconsin. This is the whole entire schedule. Wisconsin, Rice, Michigan State, at Purdue, at UNC, versus Stanford, versus Navy, versus Boston College, at Syracuse. The two tougher matchups. You should beat SMU. I think that SMU could do the whole.
They got a lot of speed.
Oh yeah, I know, and they could do the whole spoiler thing that they did with Miami to any of the teams on their schedule, and they probably will finish the year ranked. Probably not a playoff team though. At BYU is tough because it's a tough place to play. Going to BYU is hard to come out of there unscathed. It should be a victory for Notre Dame because of, I think, some of the talent differences. But
that's the talent.
BYU should at least challenge them theoretically and kind of give Notre Dame an opportunity to really check themselves. But you said it there. The Miami will be the determining factor of at least what their seed is. if you lose to Miami, you're probably looking at a seed on the back end of the top 12. There are going to be
what people are going to say. You already know what people are going to say. You know it. I'm not saying I'm saying.
I know that come next November, you will be the one saying it, and you and I will be yelling at each other. People will be arguing. It'll become our talking point of, does Notre Dame deserve to get in ahead of X 10-2 team? And we're gonna sit and yell at each other. It'll get brought up, but I think at the very least, you end up kind of getting pigeonholed into like the 9, 10, 11 spot on the playoff bracket.
You got to do like you did when you went to a national title. If your loss is going to come to somebody, it's got to come to somebody that no one was expecting, and then you respond. No one on planet Earth thought that you were going to lose to Northern Illinois. However, you went through the rest of your slate unscathed. Okay? If you get Miami coming into South Bend, Indiana in front of Touchdown Jesus and you lose, people are going to question, depending on how good or bad Miami is, you can't lose in front of Touchdown Jesus. I mean, that is just you can't.
Yeah, you can't lose a game like that at home. You just can't, especially for having lost the game the year prior to Miami on the road. Like, you need to take full advantage of the fact that you're getting them in the middle of the year in South Bend. Hopefully it's a little cold at kickoff, and maybe I doubt that it'll have much of an impact. But here's a fair question, though. If Notre Dame does go undefeated and this Miami team is a playoff team like we're both projecting, and Notre Dame beats them, how high do you think Notre Dame realistically could be seeded? Just in a vacuum. Do you think that their resume puts them into a bucket where they're probably like the highest that they could go is third? Because if Oregon or Texas runs the table, or if somebody with a harder schedule runs the table, they'd completely box them out. Or a one-loss team has a really good singular loss, and they would also box out Notre Dame. What do you think on that?
My thought would be, I'm interested to see what the SEC looks like in a 9-conference game schedule. Just hypothetically speaking, I don't even know if this is going to happen or if it's even possible. Mm-hmm. What happens if you have a 10-2 team? Like, let's just say, like in 2024, you had 3 of them. Like, what happens then? What happens? You know, I mean, like, what if, and I'm just going to throw Texas there, okay? What if Texas beats Texas A&M? I forget, I don't have their schedule in front of me, so forgive me. And let's just say, hypothetically, they beat Oklahoma. But let's say they lose, or let's just say not Oklahoma. Let's say they beat Ohio State and they beat Texas A&M. But let's say they lose on the road to LSU and they lose to Oklahoma in the Cotton Bowl or the Red River Shootout. Now what? Now what?
Well, you're saying that a 2-loss Texas team would be ahead of an undefeated Notre Dame team?
I thought you said a 1-loss.
No. I'm talking about, like, what's the highest that Notre Dame could be seeded?
Number
if
one.
They're
number one.
Do you think that that's realistic? If there's, like, I think that Notre Dame, even if there's like a 1-loss team with a really good loss,
with all due respect, and I mean this, can we go through Indiana's schedule again? Because during the regular season, they only played one really tough opponent. That really tough opponent was on the road at Oregon. Now, you're not going on the road. But, Joe, they didn't play a tough opponent, and they were ranked number 1 throughout the season before they even beat Ohio State.
No, wait. Indiana was never ranked number 1. Indiana didn't get that number 1 spot until they beat Ohio State. So that's the difference for me there, is that they won the Big Ten championship game.
1-2, regardless. But they were in the top 3 or top 2 without really playing anybody that was kind of worth a damn.
Well, it's more so Ohio. I think Ohio State actually provides you with an example, because they got the one big win against Texas, and then they rode that the entire year and didn't play anyone. And then beating Michigan kind of just capped things off and solidified it. So it just depends on how good Miami is. One of the worst thing that can happen for Notre Dame, and this is kind of my last thought on this before we move on to Lincoln Riley, Blake, if Miami kind of goes through some growing pains, which is possible. I'm not saying this that I think that Miami's fraudulent. That's not what I'm saying for anyone before anyone gets mad at me or anything in that regard. But if, say, there are some growing pains and the new offensive line and new defensive line isn't as good as we're projecting, we see this all the time happen, man. It happens every freaking year with a team that we think has a young core coming up and it just doesn't pan out. If they have 3 losses at the end of the season and they're on the outside looking into the playoff and that's Notre Dame's best win, I'm not saying that Notre Dame goes undefeated and gets kept out of the playoff field, but like I wonder how Notre Dame ends up getting perceived at the end of the year.
Well, let me retract now that I think about it. I don't think they can ever be number one because I think these conference championship games will eliminate them from being that.
That's kind of what I'm getting at is that I think that no matter what Notre Dame does, if they go undefeated, the highest that they could be is probably 2 or 3. Two probably doesn't even happen.
Yeah, you're probably right. They can get a bye regardless of where that is.
Yeah.
No one wants to really be in that number 4 spot. I mean, but that's neither here nor there. I guess we'd have to wait and see. Yeah, you if you're going to lose to a team, you can't lose to Miami. It's got to be to somebody else.
I'm a little confused by you pointing this out because, like, I just don't.
Because the argument will be versus Notre Dame, whether you like it, love it, or hate it. Well, they beat all the shitty teams on their schedule, like North Carolina and SMU, and then they faced one tough opponent and they couldn't beat them. Your loss to a UNC, just throwing it out there. Don't quote me. I don't think they're losing, but a loss to UNC really wouldn't matter if you come back weeks later and beat Notre Dame. I mean, you beat Miami. It's kind of like the 2024 thing all over again. No one really gave a shit after you lost, and then you completely ran the table. No one literally gave a shit, right? I mean, and so
I'm tracking what you're saying, that like from a philosophical narrative based discussion is that they wouldn't get kept out, but like their perception on who they are as a team, if they lose to Miami and they can't beat the one good team, like the one tough team on their schedule, yeah, it does kind of weaken their case to be a national championship winner, to go on a run, whatever it might be.
100%. I mean, it's the Notre Dame fights 2 battles: a conference, not being in a conference battle, and a perception battle. Well, really 3, and a scheduling battle. You got to win Notre Dame more than anybody else has got to win the perception battle, because the perception battle of them, of where they need to be, is always going to be there. But God forbid you beat the shit out of Miami, then you could be at number 1. You dominate everybody on your schedule, you can be there. Now
I don't think that they would beat the shit out of Miami. I don't
either. I got to be completely honest with you. That's going to be a dogfight. Like, I think Darian Mintz is a really good quarterback, and we're going to see and let these games pan out here, and we'll ultimately find out. All right, let's move on here. Hot seat tracker time. Lincoln Riley is up next. Joe, I got to admit, so we've been doing this hot seat tracker, and we're picking 1 through 10 of how much we think these coaches are going to be on the hot seat. Now, I never want to go a full 10 because you never know what's going to happen. But Lincoln Riley, coming off of a 9-win season and now coming off of the number 1 recruiting class in the country with 30-plus recruits coming out of high school, I have a hard time thinking that Lincoln, regardless, unless he goes 2-10, is going to be let go at USC. But I do think USC has kind of been doing some things to where they've been really settling themselves in after kind of a little bit of chaos. But there's been a lot of talk because Lincoln gets paid a lot of money. What are your thoughts about him? And I saw something from On3 today, which I thought was idiotic, but him being on the hot seat in reference to this, I mean, I think he would have the Jimbo Fisher effect of that. Well, I just had the number 1 recruiting class. You got to let me build with him.
So first key thing that we got to put out here, I believe I couldn't find an exact buyout number. $80 million is the number that I saw. $80 million to buy him out. So like that's the first thing that we got to just bring.
There's no way, because Brian Kelly and him had the same, damn near the same exact contract when they both left for USC and left for LSU. Brian Kelly was owed $50-something million. Lincoln has not signed an extension. There's no way he's owed $80 million. None. No way.
I mean, that's besides the point. Going off of, if you type it into Google, Gemini tells you it's 88 to $90 million. That's what this says.
Okay, I don't believe Gemini, but anyway.
I'm just this is a year. Okay, we're derailing the conversation. It's expensive. It is expensive to buy him out. I think that the buyout is going to be bigger than Brian Kelly's. The contract could have been different. Like the deal with Lincoln Riley's future at USC, there's two separate talking points here. What we think is going to happen, and the worst case scenario, what does USC do? What I think is going to happen is I think that USC is trending upward. I think that after a bad 2024 season, the 9-4 year this past year, and the performances by Jaden Mayava and some of these young guys that are coming up, not to mention the fact that they just had the number one recruiting class in 2026 after two middling years in 2025 and 2024. The growth in the performance on the field has gotten better. It's all very visible. I find it very hard to believe that this USC team would really, really struggle. They should be a playoff team. We'll talk about that when we do their preview. Mm-hmm. But I come back at this, though, thinking if things fall apart, and this is a Clemson type of a year where we thought that Clemson had a loaded roster, returning QB that showed a lot of bright signs, possible first-round pick, all those things. And they fell completely flat on their face. They lost a game earlier that they weren't supposed to. They struggled against LSU in that regard. If USC comes out, which they have not an easy schedule. Mm-hmm. They get Oregon at home. They get Washington at home. They go to Penn State. They get Ohio State at home. They go to Indiana. A lot of hard games on that schedule. If Lincoln goes 7-6 again, what is USC's appetite to keep him around? Again, I don't think that is going to happen. But when we're talking about here grading, how hot is his seat theoretically if things go completely awry? He's probably a 3. But if this season is underwhelming once again and they take a step backward, does USC willingly eat his gigantic buyout? Do they say that this is not worth it?
No, there's no way. He's going to have to do worse than 7-6. He's going to have to go 5-7, 4-8. And even then I question that because I mean, you refuse to move on from Clay Helton. What makes me think that you're going to now move on from him when he just had the number one recruiting class and you might do it again? I just don't see and I don't think they're going to do that. I don't think that they're going to be bad.
I don't think that they will either, but I'm kind of coming at the angle of increased expectations because you just brought in a great recruiting class and you're on the up and up.
Then their fan base are idiots if you think having the only one number one recruiting class gets you to having a successful year, a successful season year one. That's not how that works. You got to give them time to build off of that class. Because the likelihood of 10 to 12 of those kids hitting at a very high rate is extremely high. Now, you need to continue to be around that 8-9 win season. But, Joe, I think they're going to get to 8-9 wins. That's why I look at this and say unless all chaos breaks out, and if, hypothetically speaking, he's around the 45, and this is such a massive gap, 45 to 60 to even maybe as upwards of 80 million, there's no way. I don't think that they'll make that. They'll do that. I just don't see it. Maybe I am naive to think that, but for once, I kind of finally feel like that they're sustaining a little. Like they've sustained a little bit more. Do we forget how tough and physical that team was a year ago? And they're going to build off of that. So, look, you can say whatever you want about Lincoln. You know, his name got brought up a lot in these coaching searches, a lot, whether we like it, love it, or hate it, and he didn't go anywhere. He simply didn't. So, obviously, I do think the administration holds him in some regard because if they wanted him gone, they would have been, all right, well, go take one of these jobs then. They didn't. I just got to be real. I think that this is a 1.5. I just don't see a world where he gets fired next year. Now, if he has a bad season and then it accumulates again, all right, fine. But like, I don't think that this is a Brian Kelly level situation, because Lincoln really did put his head down and got to work and had the number 1 overall recruiting class when Brian Kelly was just sitting there not doing anything. Like, I don't. And what is the vibe around Lincoln from USC? Are the fans mad at him?
I mean, I don't think I have much of a pulse because I think that USC fans, well, but wait, hold on though, for a second there. USC fans this is kind of feeding into what I'm bringing up here. No one right now at the current moment thinks that Lincoln Riley realistically gets fired. And I think that a lot of USC fans have high expectations and high hopes, just like we do on this show. Again, we're talking about here the positive signs that were shown throughout the season that indicate that this team should be a surprise team this upcoming year and get to a playoff. They've shown all those positive signs. But LSU was in that same exact situation last year, where no one really thought it was possible for Brian Kelly to get fired. Nobody really thought that, if he doesn't do X, Y, or Z, he's getting fired.
That's fair.
And if anything, in the preseason, you and I talked about it. If they beat Clemson, the whole take was going to be, if they beat Clemson, that was the momentum that they would need to go to the college football playoff, and they had everything that they needed. I'm not calling you out. I'm saying that, just because fans were excited.
Well, hold on now. No one anticipated the governor of a state getting involved in pushing out an athletic director and a head coach. If Gavin Newsom wants to get involved in firing Lincoln Riley,
it's a private school. It's a private school, so they can't. That won't happen.
That's my point.
But what I'm getting at here, I don't know if there's some gigantic booster hiding in plain sight that has the money to willingly get rid of him. But I think that if anything, the increased excitement over potential and then underperformance off of that, after he's been there for a while. He's had one good season, and the best that it was getting to the Pac-12 championship game and not winning it. Missing out on the college football playoff because they played so shit against Utah, and it has kind of been inconsistent since this 2025 season. I don't know if I'm maybe being easily misconstrued here, but I'm trying to get at the fact that Lincoln came in with such grand expectations. It feels like every year we've been talking about, is this going to be when Lincoln gets this team to a college football playoff? An 8-4 season is not a good season. It's not. It's expensive to get rid of him after an 8-4 season, but for what he was supposed to do with the consistent success that he had at Oklahoma, he was supposed to replicate that. Shit, he was supposed to take what he had at Oklahoma, build off of it with a bigger brand in a unique market, in a recruiting hotbed where he would be the biggest show in town to attract all the premier players to come play for him, which he finally did after 4 damn years. I'm kind of saying this all to say, Blake, that as much as it seems asinine to fire him, what has he done to earn the right to stay? If he does not go at least 8-4.
He had a double-digit win season, and he won 9 games in the Big Ten.
But
hold on. I agree.
That's an accomplishment?
Considering where they've been the last 2 decades, maybe.
That's kind of depressing if that's the case.
I mean, Joe, with all due respect, ever since the Pete Carroll sanctions, they have been a little bit depressing. I mean, not telling Lane Kiffin that he was going to get scholarships taken away from him. The whole Reggie Bush situation. I mean, the Clay Helton, you're going to fire him, you're not going to fire him. Going with Clay Helton over Ed Orgeron, then Ed Orgeron goes somewhere and then wins a national title. Yeah, Joe, I mean, with all due respect, over the last 2 decades, they've had problems. And for the first time, they're having sustained success of winning 9 games a year and having competitive losses. I mean, I hate to say it like that for that university, but it is true. If you fire him, if he wins 8 to 9 games and you fire him after the number 1 overall recruiting class, I think it's a joke. I think it's a joke.
I don't disagree from that notion that it would be impatient because there was the positive sign of the good recruiting class, and you kind of have to let that bake. But I don't know, dude. I'm just trying to point out here that USC has. I don't know. We don't know until the end in the middle of the season who might really arise as the next great coaching candidate because a lot of the big names have been moved.
I don't know if there's a candidate that has more skins on the wall right now that you could go and get more than Lincoln Riley. Because he's got some skins on the wall.
I get that. I think that I'm merely just trying to point out that it feels a little bit off, not a little bit. It feels quite off that if he goes 8-4, USC would be content with that. Further reiterate, though, I'm not saying that's going to happen. I really think that this is going to be the year that we stop talking about him being on the hot seat. I really think that this is going to be the year where he wins 10 games. They're one of the last teams into the playoff field where, I mean, when we do the preview, we'll bring this up. Oregon, Washington, and Ohio State all have to come to Los Angeles. The one trap that's on here, the two traps are Penn State and Indiana. If those games end up being early kickoffs.
And I'm not in on Penn State.
Yeah, I think that they beat Penn State. But if there's like they did with Illinois this past year, if they lose because of an early kickoff, that's going to suck.
Well, the Big Ten's got to make those night games. I mean, what are we doing? I mean, those kids are playing at 7 a.m. local time. Like, what are we doing?
I don't know why the Big Ten even allows that. I really don't.
Well, look at their commissioner. Of all the commissioners that chimed in the round table, this dude's a joke. This dude's a complete joke. What are we even doing here? All right. Before we get out of here, Joe, spring football is here. There are some storylines that are coming out as of now. We'll get into more storylines as spring football continues. What are some of the spring storylines that you're looking most into?
Yeah, I've got two in an abbreviated breakdown here. The biggest one you brought up in the pre-show, the Alabama quarterback battle, by far and away is the biggest quarterback battle that anybody should be locked in on. There are some other ones around the country, but there is not one more premier than this one happening. We've got a lot of quarterback battles from last year that set up guys that are going into year two that are looking like they're going to be catalysts for their team's success. But Keelan Russell versus Austin Mack not only defines what Alabama can do this year, but I really think that if we end up in a position where Keelan Russell doesn't win in an era where we're in a spot that if you don't win the job as a redshirt freshman, you decide to leave. There's not much of a difference in eligibility between Keelan Russell and Austin Mack. How does the outcome of this battle affect the future of the quarterback room at Alabama and their success at that position? That's the big thing for me. And the other, Blake, still tied to quarterbacks. We've got all these new faces, transfer portal quarterbacks across the country. I want to know who starts to make noise. I want to know, does Sam Leavitt, does Brendan Sorsby, does Josh Hoover, does DJ Lagway make noise? Darian Mensah, how quickly does he gel jumping into the mix? I think that there's a lot of intrigue there for me because all of those teams have the potential, if things go their way, to really cause some chaos in the postseason towards the end of the year. They're going to need their quarterbacks to gel, and it all starts right now in the spring.
I do think the Alabama one's interesting. You know what I find more interesting than anything is that they made public that Alabama that they re-signed Austin Mack. They made it public, not me.
Well, they want a good backup, so they want him to feel wanted.
Is that the case? Because when Mac Jones went down,
well, that's a good point.
When when Ty Simpson went down, it wasn't Keelan Russell that they went to. And then the next thing that we know
is a true freshman.
Okay, sounds good. And
I feel like we could come up with examples in the past.
It feels to me that they want Austin Mack to win that job, if I'm being blunt.
I think that's stupid.
I don't disagree with you, but what have they seen in practice from Keelan Russell where they're wanting to re-sign Austin Mack? I mean,
they want options.
Yeah, but I feel like both of them would have gone to the coaching staff and said, hey, where do we sit? Where are we? And the fact that Austin Mack didn't transfer tells me more than I need to know here.
Well, just because Austin Mack leads the race because he's been around Kalen DeBoer the longest does not mean that Keelan Russell can't
He's
make a
going to
giant
get the
leap in the
first shot.
spring.
You mark my words. He's going to get the first.
Yeah, he should. He's older. He's the older player. Austin Mack should. But here's the thing with this, though, Blake. This is very Notre Dame-ish, where I think that Austin Mack could come away from this and look really good, and I think that he could perform really well. But if Keelan Russell is as long as he, just like CJ Carr was last year with Kenny Minchey performing as well as he did, as long as Keelan Russell shows improvement and starts to show towards the end that he's not far off from Austin Mack, Keelan Russell probably wins the job. More importantly, should win the job. A premier elite 5-star is more important to your program's future than keeping Austin Mack around. It just is.
I don't disagree with you there at all. So you talk about quarterback battles. I am interested to see what happens at Tennessee. I'm going to keep a close eye on Tennessee this year.
Yeah.
I say this year, but this spring, because we just got done talking about a hot seat and hot seat tracker. You start getting things coming out of camp that Tennessee's having issues at quarterback. We'll see.
Yeah.
Another storyline I'm really looking at is what is Miami's offensive line, because you got Fletcher returning, you have Mensah, you bring back Malachi Toney, you bring in another really good receiver, a guy that's got a lot of experience with Darian Mensah.
Barcade. You talking about
Barcade? Yeah.
Yep.
I'm really looking into that. Here's my question: is there a team that has hype coming out of spring that you're like, shit, there's a lot of hype coming out of it? Because it happens every single year. I look at Indiana and say, how do you replace everything that you got to replace? It's not easy replacing everything that you just got rid of. It's not. And I just think it's always interesting to figure out Miami, Indiana. You just faced off. You got a lot to replace, so I want to keep my eyes on there. But I got to be completely honest with you, Joe. My number one focus coming into spring from a national perspective is the University of Oregon. I am keeping every single eye that I can on the University of Oregon, because if you start getting some of these situations that come out of here, hey, man, Evan Stewart, I mean, he was out all of last year, but he's looking good. DK Moore looks good. You have a lot of these other young receivers that had key roles last year, McClellan, whatever. The offensive line is really, we thought was a struggle. It's looking good. And then you got that defense that all returns. Joe, I got to be honest with you. My eyes have completely been focused in on the Oregon Ducks here, on how I think that they're ultimately going to perform and be. I am consuming every Oregon Duck piece of content that I can, because I think that, quite honestly, they're a top 3 team in the sport. I think that they have enough talent to win the national title. And if they do some of the things and some of the talent emerges that we think that they can, Joe, I think that that's a team I'm watching most here coming out of Eugene.
Yeah, I think the bit with them has nothing to do with, like, you're never going to find out, like, oh, this is a serious issue. That a lot of times coaches are pretty good at keeping information from getting out. Dan Lanning especially is good at doing that.
Media goes to 7-on-7, and that corner room is locking that wide receiver room down.
Well, so that was kind of in the regard that I was going to say here is, we know the known faces.
Mm-hmm.
For a team like Oregon, I would say that Texas and Notre Dame being at the top of the national championship odds teams, who are some of the upcoming redshirt freshmen for all those teams that step up? Who do we get anybody that emerges? We spent a lot of time when we do these previews saying, well, they've recruited 5-star kids, they've recruited at a high level. Do those kids actually live up to those expectations? Who are going to be the young teams that are the driving forces of unexpected success for national championships? Because that's the key to winning a national championship. It's not just the guys that you brought back. It is, who are the redshirt freshmen and sophomores that take the leap? Those are the guys that are the biggest drivers.
Texas would be my number 2 thing that I'm everything. Offensively, I'm watching you the most. So for me, I got to be blunt with you. Don't take this the wrong way. I feel like Notre Dame can run through the first 8 games of their schedule and kind of shit their pants and still beat the shit out of everybody. So I'm kind of like ever. Texas opens up the season, and in week 2 they got Ohio State, and then you have Oregon, whose schedule's not easy either. I think that's why I'm focusing a little bit more in on them than Notre Dame, and then obviously, like you said, I'm focusing in on Alabama as well. So we'll see there. All right.
Yeah.
We will see y'all again on Wednesday. Y'all have a blessed night, and St. Patty's Day is right down the corner. Go drink your green beer and shit green for all I know. But y'all go have a great week, and we'll see y'all again on Wednesday. Peace.